Hello and welcome. My name is Kim Brenneman, and I'll be presenting today on case studies. It's a research study type, and I'm doing this as a part of Gwen and Mercer University. We're going to cover 6 areas today. First, the purpose of the method, characteristics of case studies, steps to creating a case study, the type of data it yields, how that data is analyzed, and the pros and cons of how to use that data. Okay, beginning with the purpose of case studies. So really looking at case studies, it's really described as it's a spotlight or a microscope for qualitative research. So really looking and using it in social sciences to kind of understand something more, the context of it. Another purpose of it really organize and investigates different cases. It's very systematic, and it is used by sociology, psychology, health research, business, and education studies. So just to go into a little bit more detail about the approach. So it's an idiographic approach. So it's really looking at the individual and describing the individual holistically, and it includes as many factors as possible. And the focus is on the context of the group and how the environment affects it, the individual, and really looking at all areas of the context. So an example of this is if I could geek out for a little bit about a study that was done about eating habits. And like, for example, what's the context here? They're a group of friends laughing. They have a giant thing of popcorn. Who are these people? How are they feeling? How much popcorn do they eat? So kind of painting the picture of the context of everything. And now looking more at the essential characteristics. So the type of research is qualitative and inductive. So it takes a broader approach to start. So there's no hypothesis. The time frame really includes the time of the event. So it could be a long period of time, or it could be over a period of time at different time points. So it's really selecting the case study and finding the time frame around that event. And the focus of it is on a single or small number of cases, so of a phenomena or event. And the case definition, is looking at individuals and looking at individual or varying group sizes. So it could be a family, a village, or an organization. So it's really an exploratory study. So finding out about as much as you can about the case study and the context and all about the environment. So steps in creating a case research study. So first, identifying who and what the event is or the phenomenon, looking at like the research of existing settings, but trying not to, as the researcher, getting as little as predetermined theory as possible, but knowing what is out there, developing a time frame for the case study, and then looking at developing a research tool, either observations or interview questions. We'll get into that a little bit more. Testing those tools to see first what kind of responses you get with those tools, and then tweaking. Then recruiting participants, doing and conducting the interviews and observations. That could be over a period of time. Reviewing the data and then making any adjustments to the tool. So that's part of case studies, being able to go back and make adjustments. And then finally, analyzing the data for themes, categories, and patterns. And we'll get more into that later. So looking at the types of data collected. So observation is one way, and this is a really powerful tool beyond self-reporting, because you really get to observe and see the behavior that what your study is choosing. Is not just self-reporting. So there's a little bit more not skewed with the self-reporting. You can do this through field notes, so looking at uh, lots of detail about behavior, conversations that are heard, painting a picture of the context, and you can note any repeated behavior or responses. Because again, we're looking for patterns and themes. You could use an observation form. So this could be something that's like with fidelity, is the curriculum delivered as intended, looking at student engagement scales during the lesson and noting the number of disruptions during a class if you're observing a class, for example. Second point of data is interviews. So these are self-reporting and they're used open-ended questions. The content, it covers specific areas of the case study that the researcher wants to learn about. The interviewer can ask follow-up questions. And they're trying not to ask leading questions, but really trying to gather information and take detailed notes as they're talking with people. And it can be done individually or as a focus group as well. So just overall, the observations and the interview data, it takes place over time. And one of the key things is a manageable sample size, because it is a lot of detail and a lot of work and a lot of time. And the data is very detailed and very systematic in how it's organized and transcribed. And so the goal really of this data is to have as little impact as possible on the environment when this data is collected. Okay, so now that there's all this data, looking closer at how it's analyzed, there's a couple of forms. So the goal is, like we covered before, is to identify categories, themes, and patterns. So it's a corroboration of data that really strengthens findings in case studies. So if you find the same pattern or theme, that strengthens the data. So a couple methods that are used. So grounded theory. So this is like the first step. It's codes themes. It has constant comparison between all of the different interviews or the observations that are done. It has open coding. So it is a way of analyzing and building theory and categorizing. And then from there, once that is done, then we can move into axial coding that really creates connections between the categories that were found in the grounded theory and finding the relationships and maybe describing the process of what leads up to the behaviors or conditions that we're looking at or the themes that we're finding. And then finally, you can use consensual qualitative research where this studies the inner experiences of individuals and it codes domains, and then there can be core ideas developed and a core analysis. So looking finally at the pros and cons. So the pros, case studies are a powerful tool to explain the whole environment, the whole person, all the functions of it, how things are coming together, and it makes connections between factors, and it really helps to understand the complexity and the contextual influences that go into different events or behaviors or patterns of behavior. And another pro is that it's very systematic in how the data is gathered and analyzed. The cons and kind of the criticisms of case studies, methodological critiques are that it's like, if you're used to quantitative data and research, it may just seem like anecdotal. And also, along with that criticism comes that it's a small sample size. It's looking at something in a smaller context. So you're not getting to those overall truths that we're looking for in quantitative research. Here are my references, and thank you for listening.